Well, thanks again for those of you who have joined us this evening. My name is Hannah and I work for the Joint Public Issues team, who host part of this internship year. We've got a number of people joining us this evening who are all linked to the internship and to the Methodist Church somehow, and we hope that we'll have a time to share some more information about the internships, some advice on what the year might look like, and also some advice on what submitting a strong application for the internship as well might look like. So first of all, I think it would be best if we kick off by letting our panel introduce themselves. So Jude, I'm going to start with you. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hello, you're very welcome to the webinar. My name is Jude. I work for the Children, Youth and Families team, and my focus is primarily young adults and young adults vocations. So I've been involved putting together and then helping to run the internship experience program, whatever you want to call it. We are moving away from the word internship though, moving more towards vocation, vocational discernment. So you may not be known as an intern when you actually arrive in September.
Thanks, Jude. Thelma, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Thelma and I serve as the youth president for the Methodist Church this year. And very similar to the internship, it's like a one-year role and I get to offer my gifts and skills and learn lots. So I'm excited to be sharing with you tonight.
Thank you, Thelma. Rachel, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name's Rachel and I oversee one half of the placement of the internships, working with what's called JPIT, the Joint Public Issues team, and talk a bit more about what the team does later on in the evening.
Thank you. And Will, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name's Will. I was one of the JPIT Parliamentary interns in 2018-19.
So we're going to spend a little bit of time this evening chatting to each of our panel in turn, asking them a couple of questions about their experience of the internship or their experience of working for the Methodist Church, and then have some broader questions as well about applications. So Will, we're going to start with you if that's okay. As you said, you did the internship last year. Could you tell us a little bit more about what you did during that year and how you found it?
Sure, I really enjoyed the internship. I found it a really rewarding and interesting experience. At JPIT, I was given a couple of policy areas to work on. So I worked on housing and homelessness and nuclear weapons in an investment context, and got to co-host and produce the podcast, which was a really fun thing to do alongside the work in Parliament. And in Parliament, worked in a Conservative MP's office, and that meant a range of things really. It meant supporting him on issues of national importance, things that were happening in Parliament, but then also with more local concerns and enabling him to provide support for his constituents on a school level as well as a political level. And I think I'd say the work was always really interesting. I'm sure it says in the job advert that it's not a tea and coffee internship, and that is really true. I always enjoyed going in and learning new things in the two different roles. I think the thing I found particularly interesting, and the thing that stayed with me, is getting to see change happen in different environments. So at JPIT, on the one hand, you're thinking about how does change happen on a grassroots level as you work with church communities and resource them to reflect and act prayerfully against injustice. And then in Parliament, the other half of the week, you're getting to see change at an institutional level. You're getting to develop your skills in both of those places, and as a small part of those processes in both places, you're really getting a valuable insight into the process of change making. And then I really particularly benefited from the development of the program, and I'm sure Jude will talk a lot more about this later, but I found it really helpful to have the time and space alongside working in two very busy and different workplaces, to have time to think about vocation in the workplace, and that's something that I found useful, and I think anyone would find useful regardless of what they go on to do next.
Thank you. So you're, as far as I'm aware, the only one out of us who spent time working in an MP's office, which is half of this role. You've talked a little bit about the things you did there. But could you tell us a little bit more about what you got up to there, the things perhaps you found really interesting, the things you perhaps found challenging about working in that role?
Sure. I was working for a Conservative MP right in the middle of a lot of the Brexit process, and so that was a big part of my year. I really enjoyed being part of a small team in an MP's office. It means that a lot of things pass through your desk, even though you're only there part-time. You get to be involved in a lot of the conversations and the decision making because there aren't that many of you there in the team. And so on the one hand, a lot of the work is reactive. You're responding to what's going on, and when you're in an MP's office, you're often not shaping the events that are happening in Parliament. You're responding to them. But then also you're working for an MP who has particular areas of interest, particular responsibilities, and so there's a chance to be more proactive and to provide research briefings and also encourage your MP to think about areas that they've not been that active in so far in Parliament. I'd say a lot of the work is quite non-party political. You know, when you're serving students, you are trying to help them and serve them, and that's something that I was surprised by, that a lot of the work didn't feel that party political. I think you asked about challenge, Hannah. I think the challenge is probably that you are working into very different working environments, and you're shifting between them during the week. And so often at JPIT, you're working on longer term projects where you've got the time to delve into the detail and really commit a lot of research time and thought to issues. Whereas when you're in an MP's office, often you're trying to you're trying to sort things that needed to be done 10 minutes ago. And so just shifting between those two kinds of workplaces is a really exciting aspect of the internship, but it's no doubt a challenging one as well. I most enjoyed the variety of working in an MP's office. Sounds like a cliche, but no 2 days were the same. And so some days you might be responding to a constituent's or a number of constituents' policy questions, and you know, there are resources to help you and colleagues to help you, but ultimately you just have to go and find the answer. And so that's an exciting way of learning new things that you never thought you would, or that I never thought I would. And I think as well, I enjoyed the opportunities of being in Parliament as well. There are lots of interesting events and conversations going on. And particularly, I think when working for my MP, I did quite a lot of supporting him and managing his external relations. So working with charities and special interest groups to think about issues. And those meetings were always really interesting. And you come away thinking, gosh, you know, I've learned something new here. And you see a side of Parliament that's not people shouting at each other. It's people being constructive and getting along and making change happen there.
Thank you. So a final question for you. What advice would you give to someone applying for the internship this year?
I think there are lots of ways into working in a justice context in the church and in politics. And so I think what I would be thinking if I were applying, and what I thought as I was applying a couple of years ago, is why this internship? What is it about working in these two very different workplaces with the different experiences of politics? What is it about that appeals to me? What is it about that will contribute to my development? And my encouragement is if you're not sure about applying, is to do it, because there's a lot of space to explore your skills and your gifts, and to think about where God is in different workplaces. And you're doing that with colleagues, but you're doing that with other young people in different workplaces as well. That's a really great opportunity that I valued and continue to value now. And there are people there like Jude and Rachel who are there specifically to support you and to support your development. And I think that's not true in every workplace. But there are really opportunities to take on responsibility as well. And so I'd say in an application, whether it's whether it's working on policy areas at JPIT or supporting an MP in Parliament, you might be the only person on hand to solve a problem or offer political advice. I think just showing either times where you've taken responsibility or just the potential to show responsibility is something I'd really recommend.
Thank you, and I hope we'll come back to you a little bit later for some of our questions from the Q&A. Rachel, I'd like to come to you for a little bit now to think about the kind of the flip side of the internship that Will's talked a little bit about, and that's working as part of the Joint Public Issues team. So you're the team leader of the Joint Public Issues team. Could you talk to us a little bit about what some of the things that the parliamentary interns might find themselves doing in their days working for JPIT?
And Will's given a bit of an example of the kinds of things that he did when he was with JPIT. I think the answer is, I can't really tell you at the moment because it could be a huge range of things. Joint Public Issues team, or JPIT, works across 4 denominations, so not just the Methodist Church, but the Baptist, United Reformed Church and Church of Scotland. So we are basically working for our churches on a whole range of issues of justice and peace. Some of them we can predict. We can predict that there are going to be issues around poverty that are going to be really important as we emerge from the lockdown after COVID. The work that Will was doing on nuclear weapons and ethical investment is an ongoing one. It's a long-term project, so that's going to be ongoing. There are other things that come up, things that happen suddenly, things that the government decides to introduce, things where we have to react and enable the church either to speak out or to campaign and have a campaign response. So we would hope that the intern would be engaged in a whole range of activities as part of the team in responding. So they might be involved, for example, in some research work. Will talked about the research that he did around nuclear weapons. So there might be work around implementing net zero. It's a piece of work that's going on at the moment. And another area we're looking around at the moment is around the growth in household debt and the impact on poverty that that's going to have. So that might be really getting into the depths of a subject and doing the research on it. But from that, you've then got to be able to communicate that. So then there would be the creation of campaign resources or education resources. The piece of work that Will did on housing and homelessness was to help churches to really engage with kind of biblical reflections around what it means to be homeless and why the church cares about homelessness. So you might be invited, for example, to take a body of research and say, make that relevant to a church, or how do we turn this into a campaign? How do we get people writing to their MPs over a particular issue? So you might be involved in that. And once people kind of get used to it and get confident, there is scope, as Will said, for imagination and people to start developing and using their own skills in this. And then the third area, which Will touched on very briefly, was actually really important and exciting part, is the podcast, the Faith in Politics podcast, which the interns are responsible for and produce on behalf of the team, on behalf of the church, which is brilliant. And I get to go around and interview politicians and have reflections on what they say. They can shape the podcast to kind of suit their own strengths and where they think the market is going. So all that kind of experience of presenting and then pulling it together and editing and then marketing the podcast as well. So it's quite a lot in 2.5 days a week.
It definitely sounds like it. This will be the 4th year of having parliamentary interns within the JPIT team. Could you tell us a little bit about why you enjoy having interns, and particularly the parliamentary interns, as part of the team?
It's just brilliant. I love having the interns as part of the team. They've just brought so much. They are bright, enthusiastic, intelligent people who are really committed to exploring the link between faith and the public world. And it's just brilliant to have them as part of a team that loves wrestling with these kinds of issues. So if you're into that kind of debate and conversation and wrestling with the really deep stuff of life, then being a part of a wider team of people who are really committed, passionate about that, you'll enjoy it and we'll enjoy having you. I really enjoy having people who are working part-time with us and part-time in Parliament. As Will says, it is a bit of a balancing act. So, you know, we will help you kind of work that out, but that is a good challenge to reach that place. But you know, once you kind of got there, once you started to kind of find that balance, I really appreciate having people who are willing to kind of spend half their life with us and half their life in Parliament. Because it means that we end up with interns who have an awareness of parliamentary language, of parliamentary procedure. So when JPIT is producing campaigns, they might say things like, you know, oh, that wouldn't go down well with the MP I work with, or that's not the best way of getting in touch with so-and-so, or how about using this language instead? And they're bringing a whole range of expertise into the team, and we're really fortunate to have that as well. Will said that these are not interns who make the coffee. I mean, they're very welcome to make the coffee, but we all make coffee. But they are a full part of a really creative team that cares for each other and is really passionate and committed to justice and peace in the world. And as intern, you would be a full part of that, and you would be really valued and cared for.
Thank you. We'll come back to you a little bit later to ask, you know, you're one of the people on the interview panel, what you'd look for in an application. But just for now, what advice would you give to somebody who's applying or thinking about applying for the internship this year?
The biggest thing is to remind people that when we're shortlisting, we compare your application to what it says on the person specification, part of the job description. And that's what we score. We have to do it very carefully. We look, this is what it says. What is the evidence that the person has shown that they can do this? We cannot guess. Please tell us. Go through the person specification and just demonstrate how you meet every single section of it. Give us examples. Don't say kind of, don't assert, but show us how you've done it. And if there's something that you feel you haven't got the experience of, or you haven't done, look at the other things that you've done in your life. Mostly things are fairly transferable. Find out ways when you have shown leadership. Find out ways when you have been able to work in a team. Find out ways when you have been able to work under your own steam, and show us when you've done it. It might not have been in a job, might not have been in an office, it might not have been in a church, but show us where you can find an example, because the more you show us, the more we can see how you meet the job description and the person specification. If you don't show us, we haven't got anything to base our decision on. So that's the one big plea that I think I'd make when you're filling out your application form.
Thank you, Rachel. Jude, we're going to chat to you for a little bit now, if that's okay. You lead the Methodist Young Adults Vocation programme. I think
I do.
Correct. Which is the programme that these internships or these jobs, as you've helpfully indicated for us, come under. Could you tell us a little bit more about the opportunities that scheme offers?
So we've had, since we started running this 3 years ago, we've had young adults in all sorts of different kinds of roles. So JPIT is just 2 of those roles. But for example, we've got 9 this year. And we had, you know, roughly that kind of, we had 7 the first year and 10 the second year. We've had 9 this year. And they cover lots and lots of different professional areas, if you like social justice charities working with the elderly, charities working with children, doing a lot of international development. We've had events management at Windsor Castle. We've had communications roles, and obviously we've had like JPIT with parliamentary stuff and chaplaincy. So there's a huge range of different opportunities that we've offered over the years. This year is slightly different. We are reframing the programme. So we have JPIT are having 2 parliamentary young adults with them. And then we are expanding our programme out into Pioneer and Mission. So that's going to be largely a new kind of area for us, but is also just, I think, offering young adults the opportunity to explore a life in mission that isn't necessarily about ordained ministry, and just being able to shadow a pioneer and explore those kind of things as well. So it's similar in its outlook, but just very different types of experiences. So the experience that you may be having working with JPIT will be probably quite different to the experience a young pioneer might have, but you will cross over with lots of similar areas as the year progresses. So
brilliant. So somebody applying to this scheme and to be part of that wider programme, as well as to do the job that they're applying for, what sort of things do you think they might hope to get out of their year as part of the scheme?
I mean, we really try and make this not just about a job. It's not just, you're not just applying for a job. We really want to invest in your development spiritually, as well as, you know, professionally, as well as personally as well. So what we're really trying to aim to do is create a holistic program that sits around the job that you're actually doing. And for this coming year, that will look slightly different to the way that Will has experienced it. We'll be creating, we already have actually created a leadership year, which is going to bring all the young adults that work across Methodism in lots of our different kinds of initiatives together on a leadership, kind of very focused leadership and discipleship development kind of course. There'll be lots and lots of things to be investing in terms of your own personal spiritual development as that year goes on. I think that's something that's quite important, not to forget that you're not just applying for a job. You are applying to be part of a program in its entirety. And you know, you can read more about what that program actually is and what some of those key fundamentals are in that program. But it is very much focused on things like enabling you and equipping you to practice discernment in terms of your future goals, your career, where you might feel that God is calling you to be, understanding what that sense of vocation actually is in your life. And like Will was saying, exploring your gifts and how you can actually use them to the fullest degree to kind of benefit those around you in church and society. I mean, there's a lot that goes into the program. We try and be very community oriented, so there's lots and lots of support is offered. But I think some people in the past have made the mistake of just thinking they're applying for, you know, whatever the job is, and forgetting about the fact that that sits at the very center of other things that go around that, being your own personal and spiritual development, which we take we take great interest in enabling that to kind of grow alongside your professional aspirations.
Thank you. That's really helpful context for kind of the wider setting of the role. Finally, for now, what advice would you give to someone who's applying for the internship this year?
I mean, I think what Rachel said was just brilliant. Checking the person spec and making sure and looking across your experience. If it's not immediately obvious, I would say even ask other people around you. You know, show them the things that you feel maybe you don't fulfill in the job, and ask them, are there things that they've seen in your life where you may have actually had some experience, albeit in a different context. And I think just remembering that you know, we don't just want to know about what you've been able to do or what you've gone out and done. We want to know a bit about who you are as well. So don't be afraid to put some of your own kind of personality in your application. You know, because again, it's the whole program that you're applying for. Even showing that you're open to kind of developing yourself, learning from others, being part of a kind of a wider network of young adults, being part of a team, you know, that you're up for a challenge, you know, all of those kind of things. Don't be afraid to get so hemmed in that you forget to show us a little bit of who you are and what makes you tick. Thank you, Jude.
Thelma, thank you for waiting very patiently for us to come to you. So this is a one-year opportunity for somebody to work for the church, as well as working in Parliament. And you've said, as you said, your role this last year has been similar to that. You've had a year of working for the church. It could be an opportunity, as we've said as well, for somebody to explore how their work and their faith interact, and explore maybe what they feel their vocation might be. You've had that similar opportunity this past year. How have you found it?
It's been interesting. I think this year has been a great opportunity to develop my gifts. So I'm a young person, I'm 19, and this in a sense has shown me what it's like to work and what it's like to have a job and develop skills that I didn't even know I had. And not just develop, but also identify certain gifts, because there's a lot that I've been exposed to this year that in previous life experiences I just haven't had that exposure. So it's been great to figure out that actually I am good at making coffee, or, you know, there are gifts that I do have that I didn't know I had before. And also you're really inspired. I think working for the Methodist Church has inspired me to see how people have, like, just the diversity that exists with vocation and the different ways in which you can work for the church. So for me, I know quite well that I don't want to be an ordained minister, but just being surrounded by so many faith-oriented people and seeing how they express that in what they do in the day-to-day is very inspirational. Like, there's much more to the church than I knew, if I could put it that way. And it's been an opportunity to just deepen my faith, because I've seen how passions that I've had has linked to my faith this year. So I've definitely grown in my journey and my faith journey while working for the Methodist Church.
Thank you. For some people, they might still be in the stage of kind of considering whether this is the right thing for them. What advice would you share with somebody who's at that space of kind of deliberating and considering whether this is the space for them or it might be something else?
I remember being in that space about a year ago, and I would urge you to take the time to discern and to think and really go through it and think, is this something that you want to do? Because that strong why is what will get you through the year. So really making sure that you know why you're doing it. But nevertheless, I would challenge you to throw yourself into it, because I think almost always it's a good experience and you will get good things out of it. Definitely don't be afraid, because I remember when I was applying, it was quite intimidating to be in such a space at such an age. But I can assure you that you are seen as a colleague. You're not a coffee maker or biscuit buyer. You generally are a valuable part of a team, and you have something to offer. So always see it that way, that you bring something to the table as well, because we all have our gifts and our skills. And also, a year goes very quickly. I'm very close to the end of my year and I can't believe it. So if you do apply, just remember that a year goes quite quickly, and take all the opportunities you can get whilst you have them, because they do fly by.
Thank you so much, Salma. So before we move to some of the questions that you guys have been submitting, and thank you for those, I've just got a couple of questions specifically for Jude and Rachel about the applications, and kind of when your application reaches them, what the sort of things they are looking for as they sit on that panel. So Jude and Rachel, what strengths are you looking for in applications for the internships this year? Do you want to go first, Jude?
Sure. I think just reiterating, I suppose, some of what I said earlier, that, you know, I suppose I'm looking for, you know, somebody who actually is, you know, can show self-awareness. They understand kind of like a little bit about who they are and kind of what their journey has been, and you'll have an opportunity to talk a little bit about that in the personal statement part of your application. So I think just don't be afraid of actually sharing some of that in terms of your own spiritual journey, and you know, being honest about, you know, kind of where things are at. Some of the applications that have stood out to me most in the past really have been people who have shared about things that they've learned even through difficult times as well. And it does, again, it allows us to see a little bit about who you are and what your passions are. So do feel free to wax lyrical to some degree in your personal statement. There are some headings there that are there to help you, so pay attention to those as well.
Rachel, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
You'd use the word passion, and actually that's really appropriate for this job. I want to see your passion for justice. I want to see the passion for you linking your faith and the world around you. When I knew this question was coming up, I did have a quick look at the job description and reminded myself, in terms of the job, think being able to demonstrate your ability to communicate, to be organised, to take initiative are also really helpful ones in being able to balance a very complex role, a very demanding role, but a very exciting one. So I think those would be the two halves of my answer.
Thank you both very much. So I'm going to turn to some of the questions that you guys have submitted now, and please do keep sending them in if there's anything that we haven't answered that you're still thinking about. So I'm going to take some of the really practical questions first, just because I think we might be able to answer those quickly. I think Rachel and Jude are probably best positioned to answer these, so I'll add a few of them together. So when does the role start? What measures are in place at the moment for social distancing and with the impact of coronavirus? So how might that affect the start of the year? And someone's question, I have a BA and will complete my MA in September. Can I apply?
I go for those?
Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
The role starts in September. I can't remember the exact date. Is it 7th of September?
We're hoping it to be the 7th. Yes.
I said I'd answer it. We don't know what life is going to be like in September. Obviously, we're going to be following government guidance. I spoke to the two MPs this week, and they don't exactly know where things are going to be. We know that things will not be back to normal. We expect that you will probably have to work at home for a bit, or a bit combined, working at home and working either at Methodist Church House and in Parliament. But we really hope that it won't be too long before you're able to work physically at either or both places. But even if you're not, you will still be part of this team, you will still be inducted, and you will still have a good experience and be exposed to all sorts of things. So we will be following social distancing and government guidance in all that we do, and we will make sure that you have a good internship experience. What we can't do is predict exactly how it's going to work out. The question about finishing the BA, having a BA and finishing an MA by September, we asked that people have done a degree, so that would be and being available from September.
Brilliant. So we've got a couple of questions that are kind of directed both at Will and Thelma about kind of things that might have drawn you to the internship and things that you've gone on to do afterwards. So one question for Will: since being on the Vocations programme, what have you gone on later to do? And Thelma, a question about, do you have an idea of where God might be leading you after your year?
I worked for the Liberal Democrats after I finished, and worked for an MP who lost his seat, and then I worked on an election campaign. I worked for Rory Stewart, who had been in the government and was running for Mayor of London, and we were on our way to victory before the pandemic struck.
Thank you, and I know that people who've been on the internship as well, so we've had a handful of other people who've gone on to work in the civil service, people who've gone on to work for other church groups, people who've continued working in the Methodist Church, lots of different things that people have gone on to do afterwards. And Thelma, there was a question there for you about whether you think your year might lead you on to.
Well, I think this year showed me a lot of what I don't want to do. So things that I thought I wanted to do and now I know I don't. So it's given me some clarity as to just being exposed to the other roles that exist in terms of working for the Methodist Church. I cannot say I know exactly what I want to do with my life, but it's taken me a step further than I was before I started this year, and I think it often does.
Thank you. So we've got a question here, particularly that I think Rachel and Jude might be able to answer for us. What measures are there for people with disabilities or with those from BAME and disadvantaged backgrounds? I think that might spread across both during the year itself and also in this application process.
I think we've had all kinds of people with different kinds of abilities and some with disabilities that have been part of the programme over the years. What we really try and do is, as soon as that person is going to be, well, even actually, let's go before that for interview. If there are things that you would like to see put in place for your interview in order for you to help help you interview better in terms of any kind of disability or disadvantage that you feel that you have, then we would want to know that, and we would put things in place according to an individual's requests. So we want to tailor those responses to you, both at the interview stage as well as then later as well. And we have worked very closely with some of our previous interns in making sure that things like accessibility, even some of the things that we've done on residentials where we've gone away and done things, you know, in terms of resourcing them or finding alternative ways to achieve the same goals. So I think it's very much about us working together. We're not, I don't think we see ourselves as being kind of like, look, you've got to just fit in with us. We do everything we possibly can to make sure that this program works for you. And so we are also, as you may have seen on the adverts, we are particularly open to receiving applications from AME applicants as well. And so, you know, I would just say that if you have got anything, some people put it in their applications and then we're aware of it from that stage onwards. And some people choose to tell us at interview for things that may not affect their interview, but may affect going forward in the year. We have an amazing well-being department within our HR as well, who are very, very well equipped to put things in place in order to make your workplace as positive a place as possible that you can thrive in, rather than have to kind of overcome obstacles. We'll do everything we can to make sure that those obstacles are removed.
Thank you, Jude. Rachel, is there anything you'd like to add to that? No. So a couple of other questions coming in, some practical ones about interviews. How does the application period work in terms of interviews? And if we get to interview stage, is there an option to attend a bit by video call? Rachel, do you want to talk a little bit about the timescales and what that might look like?
Yes, although I haven't got my diary with the actual dates for the interviews, have you?
I haven't, but I'm sure we can send those in a follow-up email afterwards.
I can find them.
Bear with me. I can actually find them. In terms of the interviews themselves, they will be held over video. So the one for the to work with the Conservative MP and JPIT is on the 23rd of July, and the one to work with the Labour MP and JPIT is on the 28th of July. And they will both be held over video. We've got experience of doing interviews over video before, and it's fine. Mm-hmm. Perfectly all right. So we can do that.
Thank you. A question about the broader scheme of the programme, less practical now, but Jude, you might be able to talk to us a little bit more about this. What development opportunities does the programme provide?
I think there are many. I know that's very vague. We are focusing mostly this coming year on leadership development, and that would encompass discipleship and discernment development as well. So we would be looking at doing things like coaching. So we would offer you some training in coaching, and you'd be part of a peer support group as well, which would be a closed group just for young adults. You wouldn't have a member of staff in that group either. We would also provide a mentor. For the pioneers, we provide a spiritual director person. And so we try and essentially, with the spiritual development, there's lots and lots of opportunities to get involved in different events and things throughout the year as well. But on a practical level, it could be a good opportunity. I'm not sure, Will, whether you, I think you came to 3Generate, didn't you? So that was, yeah, that was quite a big thing. Unfortunately, that's going to be online this year, but there would still be great opportunities to get involved in that. And I know that JPIT work really closely with 3Generate in terms of the Agents of Change programme. So I think it's a very difficult question to answer because there are so many different answers to that. And I think if you can identify, we ask you quite early on to identify personal and spiritual kind of goals or, you know, aims that you would like areas of growth, and identify those. And then again, we work with you one-on-one to put things in place to ensure that you have the opportunity to actually reach those goals. So whatever it is that you're wanting to develop or focus on, we can work with you, but the overall kind of the overarching would be about kind of leadership, discipleship, development. So yeah.
Thank you, Jude. Will, did you want to add anything to that? Perhaps you could share one of the development opportunities that you found really helpful from your year on the internship.
3Generate was great, actually, the youth gathering of the Methodist Church, because it was a chance to do something to apply the public policy issues that we were working on at JPIT in a very different context, and working with young people, you know, with a real age range, and talking to children and young adults about why they should be passionate about justice because they're passionate about faith was a great opportunity. And I just echo what Thelma said about the help that you get from working in Methodist Church House. There are just so many people around who are there and care about talking to you and are happy to have a coffee with you, and I just think that's a really valuable network, and actually often I found the development was most useful at times when I wasn't expecting it, when I just you know, had a chat with somebody in the office who made a real difference.
Thank you. A couple of practical questions that we might be able to just quickly answer for some people now. Are we able to share which MPs that are open to be working with on the programme? So the Conservative MP and the Labour MP will be working with.
Yes, absolutely. The Labour MP, they're both Methodist MPs, and the Labour MP is Kat Smith from Fleetwood, and the Conservative MP is Derek Thomas from St Ives. And it might be worth saying that these are two separate jobs. So it's either JPIT and the Labour MP, or JPIT and the Conservative MP. So you're applying for one or the other, and we want to know who it is that you want to work with.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Another question: in the initial job advert, providing a spiritual and faith reference is one of the key criteria. It isn't clear where to provide that on the application form. Am I right in thinking that actually that's gathered after the application form has been put in, Jude?
So I think it's we won't contact any referees that are given to us until after the interview. So it would be down the very bottom of the form, there would be space to give referees, various different referees. The idea is basically just to make one of those referees a spiritual referee, somebody who can speak to that, and then the other person may be a professional one. If you, you know, if you're struggling with that at all, then just go onto the website where the job is on the Methodist Church website, and you'll see my email address. You can email me directly, and I can sort that out with HR if you're having difficulty. But I think just, you know, you'll have a space for two referees, and use one of them as your spiritual reference.
Thank you. And a final practical question, and we've talked a little bit about having a degree to apply for the role. One of these questions is that this person has attended university but hasn't finished. Would this be a problem? Do you have to have a degree to apply for the roles?
Having a degree is described as essential in the job description. So I think what we would say is that if you haven't, then can you demonstrate to us the other things that are equivalent? So what is it that in your life that you have done is the equivalent of that kind of academic experience, or what you would have gained from a degree? And in a sense, that's up to you to show us that on your application form. But it says a degree or equivalent, so show us the equivalent. What is it that you've got?
Jude, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
I think just to say, you know, that the JPIT roles, we did talk about this a lot, because we want to make this a really, really accessible program, and not all of our roles will require a degree. But if, you know, we did decide that in this role, it is quite a vital kind of qualification to have. As Rachel rightly says, please don't let it put you off applying, and if that continues to be a concern for you and you would still like to apply, I think then, you know, sign on for one of the sessions that you're going to talk a bit about later, Hannah, so somebody can work with you one-on-one to sort of maybe clarify some of those things in your application.
Brilliant, thank you. We've got a question for Will here. What made you want to apply to the programme in the first place?
I had worked for a church already, so this wasn't my first job. And I had studied politics and just was really keen to put those two important areas of my life together and treat them as one. And Thelma talked a bit about you discover what you're not called to do sometimes, and I think that's bang on. And actually, you also find out what you're called to do just by stuck in and trying different things out. And so I just really liked the variety of the programme and really found that it was so as I went through the year.
Thank you. So we're just over the 45 minutes that we'd allocated for this, but I think we've got one more question it would be helpful for everyone to hear the answer to. If your question hasn't been answered, it might be that that you can have it answered in a one-to-one session that we're going to offer to people who've attended this webinar. So I'll ask this final question and then let you know a little bit more about the one-to-one sessions that we'll be offering after that. So I think again, Rachel and Jude, this would be a helpful one for you to answer. But what would make a successful interview for those people who make it to that stage?
Makes a successful interview? Well, you get the job really, but what would be a good interviewee for me sitting on the panel is somebody who has really thought about the job, really thought about the role, looked at the job description, the person specification, thought about examples of how they have met it, and thought about the questions that they might have about the role, things that they might find difficult, things that they are really looking forward to, so that we can have a proper conversation about the role, how they see themselves, and what gets them excited about it.
Jude, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
I think I would just say, I would echo all of that, and also just kind of say, just be yourself, just come in and relax if you can. I know it can be a very stressful environment, but honestly, the panel are all going to be great, largely going to be us. So that's me telling us that we're great. But I think just come in and just, show a little bit of your personality. It is very much as much about the kind of the fit with the team and, who you are is important as, kind of what you can actually bring to the table in terms of your skill set. So I think, yeah, just come in and enjoy the process. We're really looking forward to actually just talking to you and getting to know you. And hopefully you'll be able to do the same.
Thank you. And thank you to all of our panel for answering those questions and for talking a little bit about their experiences as well. So we hope that this has answered some of your questions around the internships, but if you've got more, as Jude's already mentioned, you can email us directly. So Jude's email address is on the application page on the Methodist Church website. Another opportunity we would like to offer is for a 20-minute one-to-one consultation slot on your application. We have some time to offer these tomorrow afternoon and Thursday morning, and we can perhaps be flexible if you can't make either of those. But we'd like to just offer a chance for you to come and ask any more direct questions that you didn't feel like it was appropriate to ask publicly, or chat a little bit more about how some of your experiences might apply. So I'll pop in the chat our email address. If you could email us directly, it's inquiries@jointpublicissues.org.uk. And we'll work with you to find a slot where we can have that conversation. And we'll also send out an email following this up to all of you as well, to share those details, so to make sure you've got them written down. So thank you once again for joining us this evening. And if you do have any further questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch. And we look forward to meeting some of you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.